The Central Club.
What's going on, people? It's Cullen Mace from the Central Club podcast. This episode is brought to you by Weekend Defender and Reinspire Printing. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the club, and hit the bell button to be notified of future content. Today's guest, I am very, very excited to speak to, get to know a little bit more about, and see her perspective on the prison system. As you know, in the past, we have covered the topic of prison, and being a former inmate myself, is something that is close to my heart. In the media lately, we have seen that the prisons have been overcrowded, and we have seen early prison release scheme twice now. And this guest, the way I met this person was actually over the radio waves. I think we were kind of put against each other with opposite views, but clearly the media are out of touch because they just automatically thought that someone who works in the prison and someone who's a prisoner are going to have two different totally views, which I personally think is wrong, and we hit it off. So I warmly welcome former prison officer and governor, Miss Vanessa Frake.
Good afternoon, Colin. Thanks very much for the invite. I'm absolutely delighted to finally meet you in person.
Yeah, it's weird because, like, listening, you've got such a distinctive and strong voice, let's say. And I think we've been on the radio like two kind of like experts in experience 3-4 times.
About that, yeah. I've lost count, to be honest, how many times I've done it here, there, and everywhere. But yeah, and I think, the media are always looking to sensationalise things, and I think they thought, we'll have an ex-prisoner and a prison governor and see a real sort of 2 and 8 between them, but there wasn't that, was there? So, I'm absolutely delighted to meet you in person as well.
Yeah, you do some great work. Since you've left, I've seen you on Lad Bible. You have a book out. And you're always kind of in the media, especially more now than ever, on this subject. You've got over 30 years experience within the prison system. So I don't think there's anyone better really to speak on this subject. So I'm really looking forward to this.
Well, I think, the prison service gave me a fantastic opportunity to meet people, work with people, and to try and make a difference to some people. And I hope that I did that over the years. And, I retired in 2013. I kind of, like anybody who retires, you kind of lose your way in life a bit, and sort of you don't know what your place is in society anymore. So I decided finally to write the book, and I wanted to sort of tell really how prison is, that it's not sort of just about locking people up, because that is the minutest part of a prison officer's job. And, there's some very funny things that happen in jails, some very sad things that happen. And I wanted to kind of show it all in its raw state and how it actually was. And I felt that the book helped me do that. I also found it, you see things as a prison officer, as a governor or whatever, on a daily basis that most people don't see in a lifetime. And that itself takes a toll on your mental health. And, I'm quite happy to sit here with you and say that I found that writing the book very cathartic, but it also brought up a lot of memories of suicides and self-harm and assaults and things like that, which is the negative side of prison. But above all that, there are also some good times in prison, when, finally somebody goes out and they don't come back in 2 weeks, that they do turn their life around, that they hold a job down in the community, that they have a place to live. Those kind of things matter, and they mattered to me. And then, of course, once I'd written the book, then, that in itself sort of opened up a lot of opportunities like podcasts and TV and, various things here and there. And, I've done quite a bit of work with a local, well, it's not local, to here, but it's fairly local to me. A hospice, raising some money for them. I do one of the schools in Cambridge is in a very deprived area, and I work with the students there as well, which try and sort of to inspire young women who might not necessarily feel particularly inspired. And those are things that I think are important for me because that allows me to give back. And I think that's really important.
What's going on, people? Really sorry to crash midway through this episode, but we've got an important announcement to make. As you know, from day one, we have been giving you exclusive content week in, week out. And we've even built 3 studios from scratch, which has been a bit of a graft, to be fair. Well, now we're asking for your help in return. We promise to give you exclusive content, behind the scenes footage, reaction videos, and documentaries if you really support us by signing up to our Patreon. The description is below. Stay central. Yeah, and I would just like to say as well that it's really refreshing. Excuse me. It's really refreshing to see a prison officer or an ex-prison officer in the media or in the limelight, educating, not from a bad experience, not because they were caught smuggling drugs and they're now on a podcast, or they wasn't in a relationship with an inmate. You have actually, you've done some great work. You're proud of what you've done, and you are now in the, educating people from a place of, a genuine place, really, not to capitalize on something.
Well, no, I don't think that, people think that, once people are behind that 12-foot wall, they're forgotten about. But what they forget is that, there are human beings behind that wall, for whatever reason that they've been put there. And you have to work with those people. You have to build up a rapport. You have to talk to people. You have to build their trust. And that all takes effort. I can't begin to tell you the amount of people that have said to me, "What, you actually had conversations with prisoners?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, of course I did. How are you? Have you got a visit? What's your day got on?" All sorts of manners of the things. I had one prisoner, one lifer, ask me how to write to his wife, what he should say when she was feeling down. Things like that. Really important to him. Might not have been particularly important to me, but for him, it was his number one priority at that time. And I think you have to understand that when you work with people who are in custody.
So why did you become a prison officer? Maybe give us a little background on it.
Okay, well, listen, when I left school, I wanted to go into the forces. At that time, there was very few opportunities for women. But I wanted to join the Wrens, and I wanted to sail on a ship and go around the world. And then I found out that I'd be shore-based, so I knocked that idea on the head. And then I thought, well, I like animals, so maybe I'll go into farming. And that's what I did for about 3-4 years. I went to agriculture college. I learned all about dairy farming. And I set up my own little business of relief milking. And then as is usual, what happens is, the European Union at that time brought in milk quotas, and farmers weren't sort of splashing out on people to come and milk their cows when they were on holiday or sick or things like that. So the bottom kind of fell out of that. And I happened to be in London one day, and there was I was on the tube, and there was a poster, and it was a bit like a General Kitchener poster. It said, "Your prison service needs you, and you too could make a difference." And I thought, well, 22 years old, seen a bit of life. I thought, well, I could do that job. And so I applied. It took me about a year from the time I applied to the time that I actually started. And on the 12th of May 1986, I started at Holloway, which is a female prison.
And what is the criteria back then to become a prison officer?
Back then, most of the prison officers came from the forces background. It was quite disciplined, and we had to learn how to parade. And I can remember the chief officer telling me once that I was the only one in time. which I took to mean that everybody else was in time, but I was out of time. So it was kind of quite disciplined and quite militarized. But you didn't have to have any O levels. I mean, I've got a couple of ologies here and there. I hated school. I didn't do very well at school. I was bullied mercilessly at school. Went to a Catholic school. Horrendous, beaten by nuns, and it was just a really crap time for me. And if I'm not interested in something, I find it very difficult to give my all, and that's pretty much what I was like. So you didn't have to have any qualifications; you just had to have life experience, and it was quite a rigmarole. You had to be able to read and write and do various mathematics and have like a medical. And then you went for an interview in front of 3 people face to face, and then you went away to the training school for 3 months and learned how to be a prison officer. Learned about interpersonal skills, how to deal with people who were right up in your face, how to de-escalate situations, a lot of security stuff, a lot of diversity stuff. There was a lot of that going about then. And then I started back at Holloway Prison until 2002 when I moved to Wormwood Scrubs.
And just before we go on to Holloway, which I'm really excited to jump into, you just mentioned there was diversity training.
Yeah.
Back then in the 80s as well, there was that, yeah?
Well, it was called race relations then. It was just coming into, there was no Disability Act, there was no health and safety, there was no emphasis on diversity as is today, but there was just starting to hit race relations, it was called. And I think we ended up doing 10 hours of that over a period of 3 months. So
very interesting. Okay, then. So HMP Holloway is where you first started. Now, before we do go in, I just want to name some of the inmates that have been in this prison. So you've had Myra Hindley, Maxine Carr, Ruth Ellis, Tracy Connolly, Rose West, and many, many more. So to ask you the question, is that prison really the house of horrors that people...
Okay, so Holloway itself, the old Holloway, when Myra Hindley was there, was in 1974, was knocked down and a new Holloway was built. And it was designed then as a mental institution because women were seen as mad and not bad. So it wasn't like your common and garden prison, what you expect, what you see on the TV. It was more like a hospital, and it had blind corners and long routes to sort of march prisoners along, and it was very difficult to manage as an officer. I mean, they used to say, and I firmly believe that if you could work at Holloway, you could work anywhere. And, it was a great grounding. It taught me a lot, taught me how to deal with 90 odd women on a landing who all had PMT at the same time, including the staff, because at that time there were no cross-sex postings. So it was literally, there may be in a few governor grades about who were male, but the majority were female staff. So it's female looking after female. And in the male estate, it was male staff looking after male prisoners. So it was very abnormal anyways, because usually, nowadays, you've got cross-sex postings. So you've got females in males and males in females, and it makes much more for a more normal society. But when I moved to Scrubs, it was a breath of fresh air. Working with men is so much easier than working with women.
Well, you're answering all the questions I'm asking you. I was going to ask you, do you think the cross-sex is a good thing or a bad thing, first of all?
I think it's a good thing. I know there's a lot of people who say that it's not, but, women in a male nick actually calm it down, believe it or not, because, I've had prisoners stand in front of me when a prisoner's been shouting in my face, and I've had a prisoner walk in front of me and told the other prisoner, don't speak to the gov like that. They have that, whether it's I don't know. I'm sure somebody would probably say it's, sexist that, a prisoner will hold the door open for you or whatever like that. But that is just, how some men are, and that's fine. I have no issue with that. But I do think that prison should be a reflection of society. It shouldn't be something abnormal where, it's all one sex. And yes, there are issues with that, but you have to deal with those and you have to manage those.
I totally agree with you in what you're saying. There's been many female officers that, although there's probably some bad ones as well, but there's been a lot out there who have made me feel more calm. And even as weird as it sounds, but being in an environment like that, when you are around everyone, male inmates, when you have a female, it kind of like makes you relatable, like even to like your mother, and it's like, it just makes you feel a bit more comfortable with the situation. If you're saying a reflection on society, would you say that having a mixed male and female population of inmates would be a no-go? Or would that be something you could try?
Well, I think that is probably a step too far, because you would have to be very difficult, very, very careful how you manage that, because there are, there is a propensity for abuse of one sort or another, or which I can imagine. Say a female prisoner got raped by a male prisoner and got pregnant, and it would be catastrophic, and
arguing about I'm getting to that with that girl,
it would, to my mind, it would cause more problems than it would solve.
Yeah, but at least with the officers, you're starting to introduce that part of society for when you get out. It's not a big shock.
Yeah,
when you get out and you're like, this is the first female I've seen.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I get that, and in terms of the male moving over to Wormwood Scrubs, we will go back to Holloway, but moving over to a male prison, you said it was a great grounding experience working in the female jail, but was there anything you have to do additionally to train to go into that male population?
No, I just rocked up to the gate and said, I've just transferred from Holloway, and they said, who are you? So absolutely nothing. They said, you've been allocated the lifer wing, D wing, off, here's your keys, off you go.
Wow.
I walked onto the wing, and this very tall, clearly ex-guardsman officer came up to me and said, excuse me, ma'am, who are you? And I said, I'm your new SO. And he said, would you like a cup of tea? And I went, that'd be grand, thank you. And of course, a new face on the wing, everybody's talking. I mean, prison is, it's like Chinese whispers, and, prisoners would come out their cells seeing who's this that's just walked on the wing? Who is she? You all right, miss? And they saw I smoked. You got a fag, miss? How long you been in the job? That's their favourite question. How long you been in the job, miss? Oh, 1 or 2 years. I'd actually been in, 12 years by then. So, but, that's all about knowing your audience and being prepared for that. What I did find, though, that it was dirty. Oh my God, was it dirty, smelly? I think one of the first things I did was get onto the governor of the wing and buy one of those huge, great big floor buffers, and get the place cleaned up. I couldn't believe that, there were 2 other SOs, both male. The office was a shit tip. There were tables piled high with paperwork that hadn't been done. And I was like, blimey, where do I start here? And, I worked my way through it. I got to know the prisoners, got to know them, as well as they could. Lifers are a different kettle of fish. Most lifers, once they've been sentenced, settle down. They're quite calm. They just want to get on with their sentence. Obviously, you get the odd one or two who may give you, problems here and there. But most lifers, they know where they're at. They know, and theirs is all about coming to terms with what they've done. Most of them were in for murder of partners, ex-partners, wives, whatever. As is, the statistics in society. Most
Yeah.
murders happen by somebody that you know, that the victim knew. Again, that's a reflection in prison. I mean, there were the odd one or two. I had one threatened to have me shot outside, and he was a Jamaican gangster, and I'd upset him. I'd put him on basic, and he threatened to have me shot outside the jail. He said, "Do you know how many I've killed? I've killed 3, and you'll just be one more to add to the list." But, you can't let these things get under your skin. Otherwise you'd never be able to do the job,
Yeah. Back to female prison. What would you say is we've just spoken about, some of the common crimes you'd see in life as a man. What would you say is the common motivation behind the crimes committed by women, if there is a common?
Okay. Well, at that time, when I first started, most of them were either sex workers, shoplifters to either feed a habit or feed their children. We had a lot of African drug mules. These drug barons had gone to little villages in Africa, promised them £100 if they'd take a parcel to Great Britain. They'd get caught at Heathrow, get a 15-year sentence for bringing a kilo of cocaine, never see their children again. And that's pretty much. I mean, obviously we had a couple of murderers. We had Rose West. I looked after Rose West for 3 or 4 months at Holloway. She was obviously she wasn't in the general population. She was down the segregation unit, which I happened to be in charge of at that time. And myself and the governor, the duty governor, on New Year's Day, when Fred died, told Rose that he'd topped himself. And there wasn't a flicker of emotion with Rose over that. Not a flicker. And, I said, "Are you all right, Rose? Do you want me to contact anybody? Do you want to make a phone call?" No, I'm fine, thank you. And I always felt with Rose West that there was a glimmer in her eye that, she felt that because Fred had topped himself, she then wouldn't be charged. Because when we looked after her, she was on remand. And I felt that she thought, well, Fred's dead. They can't pin anything on me. And of course, she went on to be convicted of the murder and torture of 10 women. So, she quite clearly got that wrong.
I was in HMP Birmingham, and on induction wing, they show us the cell Fred was in. Where did he top himself? Was it in Birmingham? Or?
Yeah, was it in Birmingham, Joe?
Yeah. Do you think this is right or wrong that they condemned the cell? So it's like the old door, so no one's been there since Fred West. It's more of a shrine. Do you think that's weird? Because I think people should just move on.
Yeah.
The officers were like, "That's Fred West." So I was like, okay, wind it up. It was like, like the left is like, Fred died here, which people would celebrate, I suppose. But loads of people have died in prison cells,
exactly.
And you move someone else in straight away.
Yes. Yeah, we do. And I absolutely agree with you. I think that's appalling. And whoever has allowed that to happen should hang their head in shame because, whether you're happy he died or not, somebody died. And to make it almost like a shrine is, it's verturing on the bizarre to me.
Well, anyone who's been to Birmingham will know exactly, because it's on induction wing. So what, Rose West, what kind of person did you think she was then? I
thought she was very manipulative, as all kind of, psychopaths are. She had no empathy, no sort of outward feelings. I mean, to look at her, you'd think, butter wouldn't melt. She was obviously down the segregation unit because she couldn't go into the general population. The risks were far too high. So we kept her down the seg under Rule 45 for her own protection and for the protection of anybody else, to be honest. And, we used to get her out every night, kind of watch the TV. We also had another prisoner down there at the same time who was also on, I said Rule 45, I meant Rule 43, sorry. And she was a big Jamaican part of a big Jamaican drug gang, and she turned Queen's evidence against this gang, and they put out an osment, for her. And so she was down there for her own protection. So we used to get the pair of them out every night to watch a bit of TV, and, for about 6 to 8 weeks. And then Rose went off to Winchester to start her trial. And we still had the Jamaican lady down there, so we got her out. And one night she was sat there and she was watching the news, and it was the pictures of, if you ever seen them, Rose West coming out of court, getting into the van with the handcuffs on with the prison officers. And she said, she turned round to myself and another officer and she said, "Oh, that dreadful Rose West. Who does she think she is? We should have the death penalty." And she went into this big sort of, Jamaican rant about Rose West. And myself and this other officer looked at each other and was like, "Well, who do you think you've been sat next to for the last sort of 2 months?" She had no idea. She absolutely screamed. She was like,
I believe it.
She could not believe that the person she'd sat next to was Rose West. And, Rose West looked like, somebody's auntie. She had these very thick, almost milk bottle bottomed glasses. She used to knit a lot. We never really knew what she was knitting. It just seemed to go on forever. She didn't really converse with the staff. She kept herself to herself. We used to get her out, do a bit of cleaning and things like that. I mean, she knew what was going on by any stretch of the imagination. She knew what was happening, and but she had no feelings, no remorse, no nothing.
Yeah, and she went on to, you hear stories as she was in intimate relationships within the very
with Myra Hindley at Durham. Now look at the power dynamics there. That's an interesting one. Didn't last very long, I'm led to believe.
Yeah. Did you ever come across Myra Hindley? None?
I did come across Myra Hindley when I was at Holloway. We did a prison transfer of convicted prisoners to Cookham Wood, and when we got to Cookham Wood, as is, normal practice, the reception staff said, "Oh, would you like a cuppa?" And we were like, "Yeah, we're parched." And this reception officer sort of just shouted Myra at the top of her voice, and we were like, "Myra." Anyways, this little old lady came shuffling along in this sort of brown cardigan with the elbows had worn through, and a sort of blue blouse and a denim skirt and sort of shifty, slippery things on. And brown mousy hair sort of down to sort of collar length. And she just went round everyone and said, "What would you like?" And we all said what we wanted. And when she'd gone, the officer next to me said, "You know that was, don't you?" And I was like, "I have no idea, Myra." And she said, "That was Myra Hindley." And when when anybody says the name Myra Hindley, automatically you think of the blonde with the piercing eyes, the stare, the look of pure evil. You wouldn't have recognised her if you'd have tripped over her in the street. Absolutely nothing like that. And she toddled back with our tea, asked us if we wanted anything else, and
she make a nice cuppa?
Yeah, she did, interestingly enough.
So Yorkshire.
I went on what was it? This Morning, whatever it is, Britain or whatever. And Alison Hammond said to me, "You didn't drink it, did you?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, of course I did. I was thirsty."
Yeah.
She couldn't believe that I'd actually drank it.
Drank a cuppa off my...
What was she going to do with it? You know? But apparently she was always kept segregated from other prisoners. And they used to put tape across. And if other prisoners crossed that line, they could be put on report for crossing that line if they tried to get to Myra in receptions. Yeah, very interesting.
So, again, this you could say then that they took extra care to look after.
Yeah, because nobody would want to be on that watch that Myra Hindley got murdered. I mean, I know a prisoner by the name of Josie O'Dwyer, who unfortunately is no longer with us. She broke Myra Hindley's nose at the old Holloway when she was first convicted in about the early 70s. Josie wore it as a badge of honour. She would tell you about it, how she'd broken Myra Hindley's nose.
Yeah, well, it's funny you say that because I knew a fella, Jason, who's actually in jail now again, who slashed Ian Brady, and exact same thing. He slashed Ian Brady. He slashed Ian. Do you know what I mean? That was his claim to fame. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and who knows? But you can't have that sort of level of violence, and certainly you certainly wouldn't want it on your watch. When you've got like the likes of Shipman, Fred West, high profile prisoners who top themselves, you know, it's really hard because suddenly the questions come ramming down from above as to how on earth you've let this know. And there is a real sort of a flurry of questions are asked in Parliament. The Prime Minister wants an answer, and it's shameful, really, because these are like high profile serial killers that we're more interested in why they died than some poor unfortunate lad who's come in, tops himself because he's first time in prison, and nobody really
that's the reality. Yeah,
bats an eyelid. And I think that's very sad that's what we concentrate on, to be honest.
I've said it a few times when I've told parts of my story, and the first sentence I went on when I was shipped from Cardiff to Birmingham, I was called in a cell by a bunch of lads who were from Wales. I was really like shocked that there was Welsh boys in a English jail, but as you know, every court, everyone from every city, you'll find someone you'll know. And they were like, you'll see things here, you won't see anything anywhere else. They knew it was my first time in. And the one lad who was sat at the back of the pipe, his face was just, you could tell he's been in for ages on that wing as well. And he was like, I've been here for however long. He said, but in the last month, there's been 4 people who have took their own lives. And I just thought, well, I never saw that on the news. It's like, you think you would, but I think going back as well to, people being shocked if you're going, well, you actually speak to inmates. I think it's the same with not wanting to have people's deaths on your watch at the end of the day. And I think a lot of people would say, good riddance. We should have killed her. Yeah, let her be killed. But I'm from the perspective of just, no, I think they should just rot in jail and do their time rather, because Fred West and Harold Shipman taking their own lives is a coward way out in my eyes.
Yeah, I totally understand that. And, one of my sort of little phrases I used to say was, my job was to make sure that everybody was safe, everybody was alive, everybody was kept in the jail, and those that could went home that day. And that was my job. And to me, it didn't really matter who you were. I wouldn't have, suicide is a very difficult thing. I mean, I've lost count of the amount of prisoners that either I've helped cut down or unfortunately got there too late or whatever, or ended up in a coroner's court. I can remember the first one and I can remember the last one. The others in between, they're a blur. And, that's very difficult to deal with because I looked at myself and I kind of felt, well, actually, is there something wrong with me that I've become so blasé?
Desensitized.
Yeah, about suicide. How is that normal? And I think it took me a while to, I understand that, any kind of difficult incident, you have to compartmentalize it. And, that's all very, very good. But when it comes out, it's very difficult to rationalize, really.
And I suppose that was the case when you wrote your book,
Yeah, absolutely. I say, I don't mind saying I found parts of it very difficult to write.
Being Wales' biggest podcast means only one thing. We need to be sponsored by Wales' biggest clothing brand, Weekend Defender. They've been in the game for well over a decade now, and they still hold weight within the casual scene. So if you want a deal on the hottest seasonal drops, then hit the discount code below at Stay Central.
Yeah, so writing the book must have brought back like a lot of memories. Well, I got some quick fire questions at the end, but like, what was one of the most, in particular things ever had
So I
to
think
relive?
I think talking about suicide and death, and you know, when my first sort of real incident, if you like, was at Holloway, and I was down the psychiatric wing. And there were some poor souls down there, people who should never, ever have been near a prison, but because they'd broken a shop window or something ridiculous like that, had been sent to prison because there was nowhere else to put them. And so one day I was in charge of getting the food trolley back to the wing, and I had two helpers that day. One was an arsonist who was serving life for arson because somebody had died. And the other one was a child abuser. She'd held down her kids while her husband raped them. And, we'd told her not to tell anybody what she was in for. So I trundled off with these two to the kitchen to pick up the lunch trolley. And when we were there, all of a sudden, this woman's face just peeled open. And within a blink of an eye, the other woman that I was with had slashed her with two razor blades melted into a toothbrush, literally like that. Her whole cheek just literally in slow motion sort of opened up. And before the claret started spurting, you could see the veins and the blood vessels, and it almost sort of happened in slow motion. And at the time, it was just like, oh, she's been assaulted, and off she goes. And for anybody who doesn't know, they put two razor blades in a toothbrush, melt it in, and two razor blades. Obviously, when you slash somebody with two razor blades, it's much more difficult for the skin to be sewn together.
Well, the middle one's gone, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whatever's in the middle is...
Yeah, I mean, she will have a horrendous facial scar.
Mars back.
Yeah, for the rest of her life. I had to do an incident report. She was whisked off to the nurse and did this statement about what had happened. And then they said, right, now can you go and take a cleaning party out? As if it was nothing.
Yeah, well, one of the things that does shock me, and this is why I think there is that energy there, because I'm a massive firm believer in energies, residual energy, or, things attaching to things. It's not like you witnessed a crime scene as a police officer in a house on an estate in the middle of nowhere, and you go about your job, around your area, which is very big, let's say. You're in one building, and you're in that building for years, and you might have seen people die in cells, people be abused, violently attacked, and it's like, it's in that one place and you're not going anywhere.
No, absolutely. And you might have that prisoner. We ended up having that prisoner who was serving life for arson. I think we had her for about the next 10 years, so you still got to work with her, and try and sort of help her deal with her issues. People may say, well, she was a child abuser, and a horrendous one at that, and she deserved it. Well, everybody has their opinion. I respect that. But to deal with it at the time, it was almost surreal. Like I was out on the outside looking in at it, because that is how my mind taught me to deal with it. And also, the first suicide that I ever saw was down on the psychiatric wing, where, a very bubbly young woman who'd had difficulties. She had learning difficulties as well. And we just found her one day. She'd tied her bra round her neck and died. And much as we tried to revive her, she didn't make it. And that was the first one. And the last one was a guy at Wormwood Scrubs. I happened to be duty governor that night. And he wasn't found until I think it was 7:30 in the morning. And he tied a ligature around him, and he'd tied it to the radiator. And obviously the radiators had been on because it was winter, and the smell of somebody dead was one that will live with me forever. And that is why I can remember the first suicide and the last suicide. There have been too many in between. But people say, well, how did you carry on? Well, you can't. The brain is an amazing piece of equipment, and it does what it expects to do by protecting you. And if that means you put it in a little box and shove it to the back of your head, then that's what you do.
Yeah.
The issues come when you start to unpick all that and pull things out that you'd forgotten long ago.
Well, yeah, it's amazing how many things you can take in. When you're doing training or something. I was doing my TD test. I had to do it like 5-6 times. I passed it the week.
Congratulations.
I know. But like, it's just like all those things I learned, and it's in there. And never mind everything else I know about my life, every other different thing I've learned, and the people I know, and the memories I have. I might forget about them, but they're there.
Yeah.
And if you really think about them, yeah, it's mad, the brain, isn't it?
It's a complete complex bit of kit, and I think we still probably haven't learned how to use it properly. There's a few people who haven't around the world, but I think it's very difficult. And, it's not just prison staff either. Police, nurses have to deal with death, on a daily basis, heartbreaking deaths of children and things like that. But everybody finds their way to deal with it, whether that be, the hangman's humour or whatever. Everybody finds their niche to deal with it. And if you can't deal with it, then you shouldn't do the job.
You shouldn't be in the job.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. So, in Wormwood Scrubs, can you give us three words to describe the atmosphere?
Wormwood Scrubs, 3 years. Old. Smelly. And an amazing place to work. I can't say 3 words, but it was an amazing place to work. There's so much history in that jail. It's been used. Even what's the name of the film with that? I Only Want to Blow the Bloody Doors Off. Michael Caine and
yeah.
He walked out of Scrubs as part of the film.
Yeah.
And it's been used so many times for so many. There's so much history
the
there.
Gates are famous.
Yeah, I mean, it was the actual jail was built on church land, and it was built by prisoners. And the church land was given to the government to build Wormwood Scrubs on the proviso that no prisoner was ever hung there. So any prisoner that came in with a death sentence was sent the night before to either Pentonville, Brixton or Wandsworth. No prisoner was ever hung at Wormwood Scrubs. And it's got this amazing chapel. I mean, I'm not religious, but even I can appreciate an amazing church when I see one, with stained glass windows, and all around is pictures of the apostles that have been painted by prisoners. It is just soaked in history. But again, it's 200 years old. It's old. It's falling around. It hasn't had any investment in it for years and years and years. And really, it's not fit for purpose as a prison anymore. The technology's not there. Much as you might try and put technology in an old jail.
Some things you got to build from the...
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, it's one of my most favourite places that I've ever worked. We had smoke air vents put in all around. Now, bear in mind, Scrubs used to be a Cat A jail. It's now Cat B. It's been Cat B for years. But they sort of bored out with these diamond drills, sort of big lumps of concrete that are reinforced because they were Cat A cells. And I've got 2 at home that I use as doorstops, and they're about this big, totally round, and that's my little bit of history that's come with me.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it is, yeah. It's like you said, going back to trying to put technology into that. It's only so much whitener you could put on a pair of white trainers before it comes out.
It's expensive, like the windows. Most of the windows prisoners kicked out to get drugs in, whether that was swinging from up above or whatever. We even had a zip line. Don't ask me how they did it. To this day, I don't know. But in one of the top cells in D Wing, we found a zip line that was made out of fishing rod wire, so pretty much naked to the eye, and that went over the wall and up to the top of Hammersmith Hospital.
Class. You've got to give credit.
Oh, credit where it's due, absolutely. And I'd love to have met the guy that managed to work that one out.
Well, Cardiff Prison on F Wing, you had the showers at the end, and that got kicked through the showers. And I'd say 100 yards, 200 yards is the wall, and then over the wall is like a car park, prison car park. But it's in the city. So what they were using was like a fishing rod, or it was some sort of wire.
Yeah.
And they were attaching the square mirrors to it.
Oh, right.
So in the holes, and they were frisbeeing it out. And then they would sellotape the drugs to the mirror and pull it back in.
It's ingenious,
This is before the drones.
Oh, well, before the drones, yeah, obviously. But I mean, I just think that, I saw so many ingenious ways. We had a guy who completely rebuilt his wardrobe so it had a false cupboard at the back. Did a beautiful job. If you hadn't kicked the wardrobe in, you would never ever have found it on a normal like LBB search, locks, bolts, bars search. You would never have found it. But I always think there are so many talented prisoners. If only we could take that talent and harness it and use it to good to get them back on their feet. Because I saw lifers make the most amazing thing out of matches. Just, trinket boxes with secret holes and secret sort of little drawers and all these sorts of things. Unbelievably skillful.
Yeah. Anyone infamous you met in Wormwood Scrubs?
Oh, well, yes and no. We had the guy who used to be a gladiator, Shadow.
Yeah.
He was a shadow of his former self, unfortunately, turned to drugs and, lost all of it, spent all his money on drugs and ended up in jail. It was pretty pitiful, really, to see somebody who was like built like a brick shithouse. Let's not kid ourselves.
Yeah.
And he was scrawny, thin, drawn. The effects drugs can have on people. And then we had Pete Doherty in. I didn't actually even know who Pete Doherty was, only that he went out with
Winos.
Moss.
Oh, Kate Moss, yeah.
Yeah. The Libertines.
Yeah.
Never heard of them. Anyways, he came in when he got contempt of court for 12 weeks or some such rubbish, and we put him on the detox unit because clearly he had drug issues, and all he did really was take the piss. And one morning I came into work and there was the picture of the sun on my desk with Pete Doherty smoking God knows what with a load of prisoners on a mobile phone, and you just think, well, we tried to help you, so I put him down the seg, and that's where he stayed for the rest of the time. It was, when you get somebody famous or well known, sometimes they think that they're better than prisoners. They're better because they're famous or because they've got money or whatever. And to me, that was never the case.
I'll teach you.
I wouldn't say that, but there's more than one way to skin a cat, isn't there? And I just think, he kind of just was at that stage in his life that, he was anti everything. So I suppose I believe he's settled in France somewhere now and married and got kids and very happy, and I wish him well.
Yeah. What was one of the biggest misconceptions of prison that the public have?
I think that by locking somebody away, you are teaching them a lesson, I think.
Yeah.
because I think that people in this country seem, all the comments I get, like if I go on some show or another and I say, we've got to have the political will to change what our prisons are used for. There are people that need to be locked up, without a doubt. Violence, rape, murder, child abuse, whatever. But there are an awful lot of people who shouldn't be locked up. People who need support, need help rather than need prison. And, I've had this conversation with you before. You put a drug addict in prison with a load of drug addicts. So, and then you expect them to...
Drugs, yeah.
Yeah, and drugs. Yeah, and you expect them to come out clean. Well, it's just not going to happen, is it? And I think that, people are very happy in this country to lock people.
Yeah, he's in jail.
Yeah.
Even the public, and they're like, good riddance, he's been in jail. And you're like, okay, say that in 5 years or even 12 months when he's due out, and you'll be panic again, saying, he's coming out, I hope he learned his lesson. No, and he hasn't learned his lesson. Because there's no rehabilitation.
But he's learned how to be a proper crim.
Yeah.
So he can go back out and the cycle starts, doesn't
and he's
it?
learned the prison wasn't a deterrent.
Yeah.
And it's a real breath of fresh air from you, though, Vanessa.
Well, I have a bit of an issue with the word deterrent, because that to me means,
You're not teaching them, it's just...
and we're just like almost beating the crap out of them.
Do you know what? I totally agree, and I take that back, and please go on with it, yeah.
I just think that, people say, prison's easy. They got PlayStations and, they got TVs in their cell. Well, Wolf, after the escape from Whitemore, brought in TVs. He said that prisoners are bored. And when prisoners are bored, they have time to plot things. And therefore, they should have TVs in their cell. But what people forget is that was a privilege. It's not a right. And if prisoners behave badly, then that can get taken away. And the same as, PlayStations, you've got to give somebody something to work towards. You want a PlayStation, you do a good job, you get your enhanced, and you can have a PlayStation. But if you fuck up and you turn it round and become a bad boy again, then we'll take your PlayStation away, because that's a privilege.
Yeah.
You've got to have something. If you give people no hope, how can you possibly expect them to have respect for the system? Well, you can't, can you?
I agree. I definitely agree. What was, if you can remember, or what was the most terrifying moment that you experienced as a prison officer?
I've got to answer that honestly. I don't ever had. I can honestly say, somebody said to me a very similar question once, and they said, what was your most frightening moment? And I've never been frightened in jail, because I think if ever I'd walked in and been frightened or terrified by something, I'd have had to have turned around and walked out, and that would have been it. I don't say that I'm braver than brave or whatever, because I'm not. But I don't think, in order to be able to do a job like a prison officer, you've got to have a lot of resilience and be able to deal with things, no matter what that thing is. I used to walk into work, think, I'll do A, B, C, D today. And then we have, one on the netting on C Wing taking a hostage, or, something like that. So you've got to be able to, it's all about crisis management, I suppose. But, I've never been in a situation where I've been terrified, never been in a situation where I've thought my life was in somebody else's hands. So I can't, that's my answer to that.
No, and I respect your answer, and it makes sense. I've seen, not going to name names, but I've watched interviews of prisoners, officers who talk about incidents that have scared them and you're thinking, well, that's the job you signed up for. What did you expect?
Yeah.
Not that it's acceptable, but
no, but
anything can happen.
But also, we're all different, and that may have been their experience. There's been times I've been apprehended. Gosh, I got potted. Do you know what I mean? I got potted at Scrubs.
Was that as an officer or a gun?
No, I was as a principal officer.
Wow.
because I'd put somebody on basic who was very inappropriate, female staff. And interestingly, another prisoner came to me a couple of days before and said, Gov, just to tell you, just watch your back. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I can't tell you, but just watch your back. Anyways, one night I was working late. I had a load of paperwork and an alarm bell went off on the fours on D wing. So I out my office, ran up the landing. And as I got about 3 steps out my landing, I just felt myself covered in some very nasty smelling liquid. And then for anybody who doesn't know, potted, feces, urine, mixed together in a bottle, shook up quite a bit and then thrown over somebody. It's done to humiliate and fuck people off, and it certainly fucked me off. But, you know...
Did it affect you, though? Some officers are ruined by that. And
Yeah, absolutely. No, I went... The duty governor came along. He took me to the uniform store. I got a clean uniform, went to the showers, showered, changed, and went straight back to the wing. Took the orderly officer with me, went up, opened his door, said, right, you, down the seg. I know exactly who it was. He didn't deny it. He went down the seg and then he was transferred north somewhere.
How many officers have got that attitude now? Like, I bet it is few and far between.
But you see, I'm just a bit of a... You know, I think you got to look at it like you fall off a horse. You can't let these kind of things get to you. Otherwise, you'd never be able to do your job. You know, I could have gone home that night. I could have had a week sick. You know, I could have... One of the POA guys came up to me afterwards and he says, you know, you can get $2,000 criminal compensation injuries for that. And I was like, really? Not interested.
Fair play.
So, you know...
fair play, because there is officers out there who get punched and take time off. And,
well, you know, there are a lot who deserve...
And they're entitled to, yeah.
You know, I don't...
I'm not digging any officers from this, I'm not. I'm just trying to praise your character here, Vanessa.
I'm not very good at...
Taking compliments.
Yeah. I just felt like, you know, I just had to get back out there and show that, you know, you could do that to me. You could do that to me all frigging day, but I'm still here and I'm still going to stay here. Yeah. And I think, you know, one copper once said to me, he was our police liaison, and he went, do you know what, Vanessa? He says, I was a governor here then. And he says, you're the only woman I know with balls. I took that as a compliment.
I like, yeah. So you finally did.
Yeah.
That says a lot about you, like.
So,
you became a prison governor. That must have been a proud moment for you, surely. What are the differences? Like, is it a massive difference? Is it a bigger job? Yeah.
Huge. I went from an officer to a senior officer to a principal officer, then to a governor 5, and then to a governor 4. Believe it or not, I never wanted promotion at all. I was quite happy being an officer. Except for the fact that we had a really shit SO. And I thought, good grief, I'm sure I can do that job better. And that's why I became an SO. And then the rest is kind of, you know, well, you know, we want you to go for this.
Natural progression.
Yeah. And so when I got to Governor 4, I couldn't go any further than that because I'd have lost my pension. So I'd have lost my pension rights because I joined in 1986. So it was just a no-brainer that I wasn't ever going to go any higher than that. But it's much more about policy and about, you know, looking at the overall picture, not specific like your wing or things like that. I enjoyed it. I did enjoy it. And by the time I left, you know, I had quite a good name around the prison estate. I did a lot of work at Pentonville. I did a lot of work at Brixton. I did some work at Wandsworth, helping them write security policies and things like that. Did a bit of work at head office, writing local security strategies and things like that, which I enjoyed. It was just a different angle.
Yeah, it sounds very interesting.
But the higher you go, of course, the more you get away from prisoners.
Yeah.
But I would always, you know, go to the wings in the morning, lock up, and the officers would say, Gov, what are you doing here? Oh, I'd just like to keep my hand in, keep my keys like not rested up. But that's how I was. Do you know what I mean?
No, it's great, and every time a governor would be on the wing when I was there, you'd be like, there's a governor, like, and you, for some bizarre reason, I always would be like, all right, Gov, just want to be in a good books, hoping that one day he's going to say, you can go home, or if I need tag, or he'll be the one. Do you know what I mean? Funny. I bet you had like that kind of attention as well.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't have a really rough ride from prisoners at all, really. I mean, I think it's, like I've said, it's knowing your audience. I mean, I never nicked a prisoner for swearing at me, because good grief, I swear pretty much,
Sure.
Myself. So I think it's about being able to communicate with people on every level. And I think that being a governor taught me that.
Yeah.
Working your way up. I think you got more respect from working your way up from the bottom than, like the cross hierarchical things, or the cross hierarchical is, we had one head of HR who came from Sainsbury's, well, yeah, exactly. So I think I
don't agree with that. They're two totally different ballgames.
But you look at prisons ministers over the last 15 years. I think we've had 14 different prisons ministers. Every single one of them, thought they were going to change the prison service. Every single one of them came up with ideas that we tried 5 years before that didn't work then and won't work now. And there's never ever any consistency, and that is the problem with having people from other sort of industries in because the prison service, whether you like it or not, or you want to admit it or not, is unique. How you have over 1,000 people locked in a place where they don't want to be, and you've got all of their families outside. I mean, if you think about it, pull it apart like that, it's like, what the fuck? Do you know what I mean? It is completely mind blowing, and so it is unique, and people don't understand that, and I hope with James Timpson being appointed as one of the prisons ministers, I hope that, because he's worked in jails,
yes,
and he knows how a prison works. He's worked with prisoners. His firm Timpson, focuses on hiring prisoners who have been released. And people say, "Oh, well, he's a locksmith," but actually, James Timpson started as a cobbler, and he.
Do you know what? I didn't even put those two together. Locksmith, prison. I didn't even put them together then.
But you look at a lot of guys that install security systems are ex-burglars, because they know how to do it properly.
That's you using lived experience,
exactly.
Isn't it? And it should be the same, I think, with how the prisons are run, really, whether that's inmates or governors like yourself who actually done your job correct. And I think that's the one thing that I'm really positive about James Timpson, like you said, is we both agree on the element of looking to rehabilitate people when
Absolutely.
the large population of people are, not in a negative way, but I feel they're very close-minded in the terms of, well, they're criminals. That is it. And it's not looking at the bigger picture and how we get them to become part of society after they've committed their crime. Because if we just look at them and banish them, then they're going to continue to do what they're always doing. So very, very, very positive about the James Timpson thing. And, I'd be surprised. Well, I would be very surprised if you wasn't contacted in terms to ask for your experience on this type of stuff, because it seems like, your views align on that,
Well, I mean, like I said to you earlier, I've been lucky enough to be invited to the House of Lords next week, and I'll be giving evidence to the Home Affairs Select Committee on prisons, which is something I'm really looking forward to, because, I've got a lot to say about it, and I think, hopefully one little bit of it might actually,
I'm sure it will
make a change, because that's, how it should be. We need change in our prisons. People say to me, the question I get asked the most is, does prison work? And my statutory answer is, no, not in its current form, it doesn't.
we want it to. We hope it will one day. But right now, no. Yeah,
No.
I agree. We've got a couple of just fire offs before I go into like the current situation, before we do get off. So like, what's the most bizarre thing you have found on a cell search?
Well, on a cell search, gosh, the usual stuff. But I can tell you the most bizarre thing I ever found was a snail, a giant African snail, about so big, which when I was at Holloway, the enhanced wing, we used to let the women go down to the market on a Saturday because they could cook their own dinner. And we had these African women who, no escape risk, no risk to the public. They were temporarily released to go down to the local market to pick up some food to bring back and make a stew or whatever for their weekend meal. And obviously they were searched on the way back in, and this one, we found a giant African snail slithering across my desk. And I was like to the woman, "What do you think you're doing with this?" And she says, "Oh, we're going to boil it up and make stew tonight." I went, "Nah. No, you're not." Anyways, I sent an officer in a cab.
Bizarre.
Yeah, in a cab to Regent's Park Zoo. And apparently this snail was a rare species of snail.
With no problem.
Yeah, so they took it in and looked after it. It may well still be alive. Who knows? I don't know how long they live, but
It's like a tortoise, maybe.
I mean,
Crocodile.
that was probably the most bizarre thing, without a doubt.
Any decisions that you have made that, morally difficult, that kind of questioned?
There's one decision that I made that I regret, and that is we had a prisoner who we believed was feigning illness to get out to escape custody when I was at Wormwood Scrubs. Now, bearing in mind, Wormwood Scrubs is there, and literally across the road is Hammersmith Hospital, literally next door. And we knew that there was some plot that he may try to escape. And the doctor said, "No, he's got to go out." And we were like, "We think he's faking this." No, he's absolutely got to go out. Now, I accept that decision. Life must come before security. Even the ambulance people, though, when the ambulance rocked up, said, "This guy's faking it." But the doctor was insistent that the prisoner goes out. Now, we sent him out. We sent him with a three-man team. We cuffed him. We phoned the local police. They weren't really interested, said, "Oh, well, we'll send a car, drive past if we can." I phoned the hospital security, let them know. And about 10 minutes after he'd left the gate, I got a phone call saying that he'd escaped under an armed escape. Car had hit the ambulance. Two guys had got out, threatened the ambulance crew with guns, threatened my staff with guns, and demanded the keys to the handcuffs, which, of course they gave them to them. You don't look down the barrel of a gun and say no. Those when I got to the hospital, which was again after that phone call 5 minutes later, I found the ambulance woman in absolute bits. I found my staff in bits. One of the staff retired, never worked again. One gave up being an officer and went into admin, and the other killed himself. And that's the effect of what happened that day. And, I look at how I came to that decision, because it was my signature on the risk assessment, and it was, I'd done everything that I thought I could do. And I can't think that I could have done anything else, but I still regret that day.
Well, I think an outcome like that, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Because if he was genuinely ill, he could have died, You never made that decision. You never made that escape plan.
No, but, I think you have to, when you're a governor, you have to take responsibility, and the buck stops with you. And obviously there was a huge investigation, and it was all cleared that everything that could have been done was done.
Traced,
but it doesn't help with how you feel about that day.
What happened to the prisoner who escaped?
Oh, he got caught about 6 weeks later. Obviously ended up at
the case, isn't it?
Yeah, ended up at Belmarsh, Cathay, E-list, and I think in the end he got about another 10 years for it. But interestingly, the two guys that actually held the ambulance up were never caught.
And I think the wild thing about it is he basically destroyed another 3 lives as well.
Yeah, he did. Absolutely, he did. Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
What year was that about then?
Let's see, about 2008, 2009.
Not too long ago.
No, not at all. Oh.
Corruption.
Yeah.
Big topic. 2 big topics at the moment: overcrowded prisons and corruption. Really.
Yeah.
What one do you want to talk about first?
Let's talk about overcrowding first, and we'll save the best to last, shall we?
Yeah. Well, I believe from the conversations we've had, we're both kind of on the same page with this, that a lot of people within this country shouldn't be going to prison. There should be punishment. There should be prosecution, 100%. But take it away, Vanessa.
Okay, overcrowding. I think anybody with any insight could have seen this coming 15, 20 years ago when the Labour government first brought in IPPs, which are the indeterminate prison sentence, which basically means a prisoner got a life sentence with, say, a 2 or 3 year tariff. But unfortunately, in that 2 or 3 years, he had to do a load of courses, but nobody thought to think, well, actually, there's lifers way ahead of all these IPPs. Some of them were given an IPB for nicking a mobile phone. And there are still around about 1,000 IPPs in prison. It was stopped in 2012, finally. And they started to clog prisons up. Overcrowded in prisons isn't something new. In 2009, 2010, when Jack Straw was Home Secretary, the Labour government then did a huge early release scheme that lasted 3 years. I think 81,000 prisoners were on that early release scheme. So it's nothing new. And then successive governments, prisons ministers, justice secretaries, home secretaries, whatever their title is, have just failed to invest in our prisons. Very few new prisons have been built. We've got more Victoriana prisons in this country than we've got new prisons. And I've seen, I saw a reporter from the BBC at Pentonville. And she walked in a prisoner's cell, and the guy said to her, "Look at this, miss." And he literally lifted his toilet up, and there was a hole in the floor. I mean, is that really how we want to keep people? Is that with humanity and dignity? These jails are falling apart. Wandsworth had raw sewage flowing down the landing. I mean, let alone having to live in it, work in it, trying to rehabilitate people when you're keeping them worse than you'd keep,
But this is the problem, I think, with the public perception of just let them rot.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we're going to let
the rats come, let the cockroaches
they never
come.
get, when you hear people, PlayStation, TV, and you're like, well, if that's the case, there's no interest, public interest. Why are governments going to run a bid on, we're going to fix prisons because no one's interested
Exactly. In it? And nobody wants to spend any money on it. And I understand that. Prison is not a vote winner, whichever way you look at it. If we had a party that stood up and say, right, we're going to invest in our prisons, we're going to invest in reoffending, they wouldn't get the votes because people want to see the general election just gone. Not one party said, all they wanted to say is, we're the party of law and order. Yeah. We're going to sort this out. We're going to build more prisons. And building more prisons isn't the answer.
No, it's like let's build more cancer hospitals.
Absolutely.
No, let's find the cure, please.
Absolutely.
Let's find the cure of this. And it's, if we're just slamming people to prison, what I don't understand is common sense. We should be rehabilitating because you're going to be the next victim potentially.
Yes. And also, if there's crime in your neighbourhood, well, that's going to cost you. It's not.
It should be a part of the voting. It should be
It
something.
should be. But, I had every bloody party rock up to my door banging on it. And one woman stood there and said, I said, so what about prisons then? She went, oh, I don't know anything about prisons. I said, well, clearly you're not going to get my vote then, are you? I said, Google my name and then come back when you've read about prisons.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
And the IPP thing, which I think the worst thing about this again, I use cancer as another analogy, let's say. They stopped retrospectively, didn't they? So those who still were on the IPP, it's like they've admitted, look, it's inhumane, we're going to scrap it. But those who were on it, you're going to stay on it. That's like saying, look, we found treatment to cure cancer because you contracted cancer before the cure. Sorry, you're not having the cure.
I mean, to put it in perspective, there's a guy who nicked a mobile phone. His tariff, he got a life sentence, but he got a tariff of 3 years. He's done 18 years. Yeah. And he's probably done 18 years because he's well fucked off because he's got no chance of getting out. His behaviour has probably been dreadful in prison, and you can't blame the guy, can you?
He's stolen a mobile phone. He's seeing people who have probably manslaughter, other horrific things. We look at the, soft sentencing for sexual abuse and pedophilia. He's seeing them come out.
Yeah. Or not get a sentence at all.
Or not get a sentence at all, like some TV presenters. And then, people wonder why they take drugs in prison. They their head must be in a mess.
Completely.
And then they come out and their probation officers, they recall them for giving a negative test. And these people are too scared to admit they've got a drug problem. So it's just a deeper circle because they're scared to get recalled. Because if they're back on recall with IPP, it's another 2-3 years before they even get looked at. Yeah. So it's just a mess.
Yeah, it is completely.
I'm
a firm believer they should all be resentenced and given an end date.
Yeah, I totally agree. And there's a bit of a morbid perspective with me where I think, all right, it's stopped now. There's still a couple hundred or maybe 1,000 on it, and they're just thinking, we'll just let them die out, and when it's done, we'll just start fresh. That's what I genuinely think.
Yeah.
It's so sad. So yeah, what would you say some of the things that we need to, what could be fixed with the overcrowded prison?
Well, I think the first thing is to look at the sentencing. Like, we've discussed at length about who should be in prison and who shouldn't be in prison. Has our focus about what a prison is for been blurred? Are we just like locking everybody who does some stupid misdemeanor up? Comments on Facebook, or breaking a shop window, or nicking something to feed a habit, or getting caught for doing sex work, things like this. To my mind, prison has a place, absolutely, but for violent, serious crimes that the public need protecting from.
Yeah. And the same with community service and stuff like this. There needs to be an end. It needs to be light at the end of the tunnel. I remember I'd done community service. I was painting a pub fence, or I was cutting the grass in the in the graveyard. And it's like, well, okay, well, give me a job at the council at the end of it. Or, give me something, not, go to jail. Yeah. Do your little educational courses.
Because what does rubbing graffiti off a wall teach you?
It's meant to be naughty boys sit on the naughty step for a bit. That's what it is.
Yeah,
isn't it?
And I think our justice system, and I'm talking about those that sentence, are quite antiquated, and I think that they often look at people standing in the dock and think, yes, you're like my nephew or my granddaughter or whatever, and I'm going to teach you a lesson like I'd teach her.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't work. I get quite frustrated because I say this time and time again and get asked the same questions time and time again, and nothing ever changes. And my one hope is that something will finally change. And, what is wrong with having a decent cell with, decent furniture in it and a decent bed that's not just a bit of rubber because the covers come off or the pillow's so flat you might as well not bother. What it's nicely painted, it's not scrawled all over, or the windows aren't broken. What is wrong with having a decent place for people to live that gives them a bit of respect, and pride in their little bit?
Well, the thing that really frustrates me is here in Britain, we're all tolerance, we're all about human rights. What you're saying with when the migrants come in, human rights, but you don't want to give human rights to citizens who are in prison. You treat them like subhuman. Like the cockroaches that run around their cell. And look, let's go on to the corruption side of this as well, and also like the type of officers that are in there, because you're not the actual only officer who when I used to go in on my 5th or 6th sentence for shoplifting, and the officer who's been there for 30 years goes, I can't believe you're back in. Like, have they tried anything else? Why are they sending you to jail for this? It's just ridiculous. I think a lot of the old staff seen that as well with the frustration. I'm sure you come across a lot of officers and the same, and I think that's why a lot of them, Mr. Rundle, I still call him Dan Rundle, who now works in the community, he left the prison system because he felt he was helpless in there, and he wanted to help try and prevent, rather, because there was no rehabilitation in there.
Yeah.
So
and I think the majority of prison officers are like that. They want to try and help people and make a difference. Yes, you're going to get the bad apples in the bunch. Of course you are, like in any big institution, of course you are. And corruption is part of that. And when you think what the price of a bit of cannabis is outside here, and when you think what it is
in there,
in jail, what is it, 3-4 times, 5 times the price? So obviously there's money to be made. We know that, we used to believe that we got people who would go and break a window, stuff themselves full of drugs, come in to deal with it over a 6-week sentence, and then bugger off, make them money and then bugger off out. Or that staff were specifically recruited, local recruitment. And that is a big thing for me, is local recruitment. Recruitment used to be national. So you'd get staff from up north come down south, and vice versa, and all around. Now it's all local recruitment.
Dangerous, isn't it?
It is dangerous.
Because you're going to know people on the estate who you're intimidated, who know where your family lives, and they're going to say, that's all right, because my brother's going around your house later.
Yeah.
And
you're putting young, inexperienced people in a very vulnerable position.
Yeah.
And I think that, that's got a big thing to do with corruption. That, vetting, training, support, they're all buzzwords, but they all matter. How you think you can train a prison officer in 7 weeks and then throw him on a landing full of hardened criminals.
They're two different things.
When he's 18, 9, or he's 18, or they, whether he's 18 or 19, do you know what I mean? And expect him to be a cracking, stalwart prison officer to doing its job. It's making people vulnerable.
Do you think there's anything in this kind of theory that I have, which ties into that wonderful female who got caught shagging the inmate? Let's put it as it is. That the day and age we live in, everything's about image, and I do think that a lot of people go into certain work not because of passion, not because to feed their family or their career, but for image. And I think a lot of youngsters are going in for image. We look at Berwyn and how many young female officers were caught having intimate relationships. We look at Park Prison that has had, its problems, although there's some great work going on in there as well. And of course, what happened in the prison in London. What do you think about?
To my mind, I mean, that woman should never have been allowed to wear the uniform in the first place. You only had to Google her to see, that by her going in made her vulnerable anyway. She was on, I can't remember the name of the social media, some sort of sex social.
Fab swingers, probably.
Yes, so something like that. And that she'd been on some sex show on one of the channels, and really, is that the image you want to portray in the prison service? To my mind, that should have been a big cross against her name straight from the off. And that's when I go back to vetting. I do think, though, Colin, that focus is always put on the woman. And I know that she wears the uniform, that she's got the power. I understand that. But, there is a law that the prisoner could be put under, which is the Bribery Act of 2010.
Oh, I totally agree.
And nothing seems to be done to the male prisoner. At Scrubs, we were the first to do it, where we charged a prisoner with bribery and corruption of an officer, and he got 3 years added onto his sentence.
I was going to say, nothing would happen to someone who's having an intimate. I thought they would be punished as well. Like, that should go without saying.
No.
Or moved to a different jail. Or
well, I mean, I would hope they were moved to a jail.
That jail been them, yeah. Okay. No, I agree. Like, it takes two to tango.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you that that was all for image, but unfortunately for her, image is going to cost her some serious jail time. I would imagine. I mean, she's up for sentencing in the near
That's going to be
future,
really, really interesting to see what happens with her. Isn't it?
I mean, there's just no excuse for it. I know there's another one who works at a jail near me in Cambridge that's also going through the courts at the moment. And yes, it does seem a lot of it, but it also seems a lot of it because it's all highlighted now.
Yeah.
It never used to be highlighted, but certainly Berwyn, I know you're talking, I think they had 17 in 2 years or something.
Of course, teething problems.
Yeah.
She's a new jail. I get that,
But again, this is a new jail with old prisoners run by new staff, and the problem with the prison services is they got rid of so many experienced staff at once, literally overnight. Literally in 2 years, the majority of seniority just went. So if you had 2 years in, you were looked at as
a peer.
Yeah,
you're the peer.
exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And experience.
So what do you up to there?
Experience counts for so much in the prison service.
Yeah.
And, like I said, when I joined, you didn't have to have any O levels or anything like that. You just had to have life experience. And that matters more than anything.
If you was, let's say you was Vanessa, Justice Minister, let's just say that.
Yeah. Okay.
What would you do? What are your fixes that you would do to make the prisons work?
Okay. Well, first of all, I would look at all of female prisoners. And there are, I'd say a handful, but maybe there's about 4,000 female prisoners. Now, in Northern Ireland, they don't put females in prison. They put them in kind of halfway houses because of the fact that most are carers, most have children, all that sort of thing. Most are in for drug offences or shoplifting or sex workers, that sort of thing. And they put the serious ones in a wing in one of the male jails, the likes of Rose West, Joanne Dennehy, whoever else.
Got like
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting.
But in this country, literally we're across the water. Northern Ireland is part of this country. Here we seem to, a woman is twice as likely to be jailed for a first-time non-violent offence as a man. And that goes back to what I said about the justice system, with old men in grey suits looking at the person in the dock and thinking, that's my daughter, you need to be taught a lesson. And that's the first thing I'd look at is there a possibility that we can do something different with women? Because women are a different entity to men. There's a lot of men that won't like me saying that, and I don't mean any disrespect to men. I have the utmost respect for men. But what I'm looking at is their crimes are usually more about their environment, their social environment, the children and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the first thing. I'd look at all the Victorian prisons and see if there was any way that we could make them better. You know, I read something yesterday, and it was, you know, they're all about building all these prison places, and the company that's been agreed to build them all has gone bust. So, but you know, they'll be the cheapest one going, and probably the worst ones, and you know, they'd probably be absolute crap. But look, there's no getting around this, but the word investment is going to come up time and time again, because they haven't had any. You know, even from 2010, when George Osborne said, you know, we want more for less, and he chopped the prisons budget by 3% year on year on year. And when you think 80% of a governor's budget goes on staff, well, what are you left with? Peanuts.
That's crazy. Vanessa, it's been a real pleasure speaking to you.
Likewise, Carl.
You're doing some great work. You know, I'm always hearing your name pop up. And you're definitely going to get your book. Where can people find your book?
You can get it on Amazon. Amazon's probably the easiest. It's on audio. I actually narrate it.
Well, I was going to say you have got a really good voice for it.
Yeah. They asked me to do it, my publisher, and I said, yeah, actually, I quite enjoyed it.
How long did that take?
2 days. It was supposed to take 3, but it took me 2 days because I just kept going. Couldn't speak by the end of it.
Yeah.
But so you can get it on audio, Kindle, or paperback, whichever you like.
Fantastic. And, you know, in the future, we might be able to do some other content, whether it's a part 2 or we do something else. I'm sure there's going to be more things happening to do with the justice system.
Well, I'm sure our paths will cross again, Keller. And I'm on Instagram.
Yeah. Plug away, Vanessa.
Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. Find me on any of those. I can do Snapchat, but not very well.
Yeah.
My daughter taught me.
I'm glad you're enjoying. I'm glad you're enjoying yourself, and you know, you're actually, like I said again earlier on in this interview, you're doing this for the right reasons, and you know, you're not doing it for the fame. You're not doing it because of something you've done naughty and, you know, glorifying something. You know, you just want to make this a better place, and you know, that just shows how the way you came into this was for the right reasons as well. So thank you very much, Vanessa, for coming down, sharing some information, some insight on what it's like with people like Rose West and Myra Hindley and people like that. And yeah, but hopefully we'll catch up soon.
Okay, thanks very much for having me, Colin.
Guys, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Like I said, or like Vanessa said, go and follow her on all her social media platform. I know that I'm going to be looking forward to reading that book. And yeah, you know, hopefully the right people get to see this and take some valuable information from this. And let's make this country a better place, and let's start with the prisons. Stay central.
The Central Club.